Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a to-do list database app. So in the previous series we had a PHP app that stored to-do list items in a text file, but now we're going to use a database to do this, and we're going to add some more functionality. So first we need to create a database. For this we need to go to host PHP MyAdmin, and then just enter your credentials and sign in. Now we're going to create a new database. Click new. It's going to be called ToDoDB. Create database, click on ToDoDB and go to SQL. So now we're going to create a actual database table for ToDoDB, and I'm going to write this script, create table. So this is going to actually create a table, and this table is called items. Now the items table will have several things: item ID, which is integer type, and it's going to be the primary key, which each item is going to have a unique item ID. Therefore it cannot be null, not null, and it's going to be primary key. And I'm also going to make this, I'm going to give it the auto increment feature because I don't want to keep track of IDs. I want the database to automatically assign a ID every time we have a new item created. Otherwise I would have to know what's the next ID, and I don't want to go there. So the second property of this table is going to be item description, which is going to include what the item is about. It's going to be varchar, which is like a string-like variable type. Maybe not null. I'm not going to allow fields to be null. The next property is going to be item due date. So this way we can actually access some the items based on their due dates. We can prioritize them, etc. And it's going to be date type. And the last one is item priority, which is also varchar, 200 characters, and not null. Now, a couple of important things. After every item, if there's another, after every property, if there's another property coming, you have to put a comma, and if there's no attribute after the current one, then you don't put anything. Okay, and basically once you write this, just click on go, and this will create a table, which you can see here, items table, with the columns and everything. Now let's insert some data into this column, into this table. So insert into items, item ID, item description, item due date. These are the columns of the table, or attributes you can call them, priority, and values. So 0, first description of the item. Let's say create video tutorial, and then due date is going to be 2018 05/12, and then priority, let's make it high, and let's run this. Well, we inserted one, so I'm going to insert a couple more. Items ID, let's say create a to-do list database, change, it's priority, and then let's say just one more, publish series on YouTube. Now let's check, make sure everything is there. Select all from items, and you can see that all the data is there. Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to write a PHP service to read data from database and encode it as JSON, JavaScript object notation, type and print it in the browser. Later in the later videos we're going to grab that JSON from the client side and actually use it in our applications. So let's start with the text editor, and then let's open a new file. I'm going to start with the PHP tags, PHP, and then let's save this. So this one I'm going to create a new folder. I'm going to call this services, and then here I'm going to just write service.php. Okay. Now first we need to start with defining our database related variables. So where is your database at? URL. Now this is going to be it can be your IP address or it can be URL of your database. Currently we are working with the local server on WAMP or XAMPP. So I'm going to just enter my local host. Actually I'm going to enter 127.0.0.1. So this is my this is the URL of my database, okay, for my local database. And then the second thing is, what's the name of the database? The name of the database is going to be to-do list DB. You gotta make sure that's the name of your, it's just to-do DB. So I'll create it as to-do DB. You can look it from your PHP MyAdmin. So mine is to-do DB, not list. And then the username, for now my username is just root, and the password is I don't have a password, so I'm going to leave it blank. Actually, you would want to have a password, so you need to change those settings. It's more secure that way, obviously. Now we're going to start creating a connection. MySQL I connect URL, and then the parameters are going to be URL, username, and then password, and the database name. So this is going to create a connection for us to the database, and let's see, we need to check if the connection is successful or not. Now this means that basically this here equals to this. So this condition will be satisfied if the con returns false. Okay, so let's see, if the con returns false, I'm going to kill the connection. I'm going to print the reason why the connection failed. Connection failed. And print the reason. If not, I will continue. So first we need to define our query that we want to run in the database. SQL, so it's going to be our query, and I want to choose everything that's in the database. SQL, select all from items, and the result, I'm going to have a variable called result, which is going to run the MySQL I query method, which this method is going to run the query in the database for us. And another variable I want is rows variable, which is going to be an array. So basically I'm going to run the query in the database, and then I'm going to it's going to return me a table, and I'm going to read it row by row, and each row I'm going to push it into this array. Okay. So here we're going to check how many rows return for the result. So if 0 rows return, that would mean that there is no data for this query, or there is something wrong. So if the number of rows from the returning resulting table is greater than 0, means we have some data, I'm going to read them row by row. So this variable, I'm going to read each row into this variable r equals, as long as, so this while will run as long as there is another row left to read. Okay. So result is the returning table again. I'm going to open curly braces. So every returning row, I'm going to push it into the array. So my array I'm pushing it into is the rows, and I'm pushing the row r into rows. So this will create all the data for me, okay? And once I'm done reading all the data, I'm going to print this data, JSON encode rows. Now, this is all the rows that returned, and this will turn that data into JSON format. So this way, the client can make a request using JavaScript, and it will and then the server will return it in a JSON format. So the client can then take the JSON format, which is JavaScript object notation, and use it in the JavaScript to print the table or do something else. And this is a neat way to handle it, because we're not mixing PHP code, server-side code with the client-side code. So there's more layerization here, and client-side will handle client-side, server-side will handle server-side, instead of mixing them together into one file. Okay. And if there's no rows returning, number of rows is equal to 0, then we're going to just print no data. But these are no, there's a problem. And after that, I'm going to close this connection. And let's run this in the browser. So localhost /services/service.php. Okay, we have an error, call to undefined function JSON encode. Services on line 23. Okay, I made a typo. Now it should work. And you can see that this is a JSON that is returned. So these are objects. So each item on the to-do list is returned as an object, right? So we have the item 1, which is here, the item 2, which is all the way to here, and item 3 is here. Each item has properties, item 1, ID, and the item ID, and then its value, description, and its value. And so this is really nice format for JavaScript, and since we're going to use JavaScript in the client side, it's going to work seamlessly. So if you want to validate your JSON, you can just go and look for some JSON validator, and then paste your JSON. It will also format it for you. So validate JSON. You can see it formatted also nicely. So it's the first item, and this is an array. The square brackets outside, they denote an array. They show that this is an array. So this is an array of objects, array of item objects. Each object has 4 properties and values for those, which they all come from the database. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to add more objects to the database. Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you how to fetch the data from the PHP service that reads from the MySQL database. So this is an example HTML page, and I will write some JQuery code here. But first, let's go over the page and so you know what's in here. We start with HTML tags, and then inside the head tags, the title of the page, which is going to modify the browser's tab. Then here we import the jQuery library from CDN.js, Content Delivery Network, that has a bunch of JavaScript frameworks and libraries. So we need to include this for jQuery code to work. In these script tags, I'm going to write the jQuery code. Here, I got 2 separate divisions inside the body where the actual content of the page is. The first division is going to contain the to-do list items, which I'm going to retrieve from the PHP service that prints in JSON format. And in the second part, I created a simple input group where you can actually enter a new to-do list item, and then you can click on the input button, this button, to submit that to the server. So we're going to have to write another service that will receive the data that is sent from here and enter it in the database. In the second division, I have labels for each field of the to-do list item in my database. So item except the item ID, because item ID, if you remember, it's automatically generated, automatically incremented in the database. So we have item description and input for that, and then due date. Now the due date, I'm going to do it as a text, which it can be problematic if the people don't enter the right format. But to fix that, you would use some regular expressions or some input masking, but those are not within the scope of this video. So in this program is going to assume that the user will enter the right format. So I put a placeholder for that. And item priority. So if you run this, this is what you will have. Okay, this is for adding a new item. It's a very basic HTML, and to-do list items will be printed here that are going to be fetched from the database. All right, now let's write our first jQuery code to fetch the actual data from the database. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check that when the page is loaded. So that when the page is loaded from the server, okay, we're gonna run the code that's going to retrieve it from the server. So to detect that, I'm going to start with document dot ready function. So we need to actually include the curly braces for the function. Now remember, when the document is ready, it's going to run this block of code here. Okay, so once the document is ready, then we can use the jQuery's get method, which will take a URL parameter. For now, we're working with the local host. So if you have your app on the cloud, you can enter that URL. Since I'm working with local host on my own computer, the server is on my computer as well as the client for now, I'm going to enter the localhost URL /services/service.php. Right, so I'm entering the URL for this one, for this page. Okay. Now that's the first parameter. The second parameter is a callback function. It's going to return a data and a status. Now, when the document is ready, it's going to run this block of code, and this block of code will access to this URL. And when that happens, it's actually making a GET request to the server, and the server will return data and a status. So the data will be coming from this. The JSON will be printed, so that's what it's going to return to this page, index.html. And for now, let's just print this data, and then we can format it nicely later. Console.log. So I'm going to open the to-do list. I'm going to open the console here, and this is in the file system. Let's make sure this runs on the server now. HTTP 7.0.0.1. This is the same thing as localhost. Now let's run this. We had a problem. Services not found. Okay, let's double check everything. JQuery. So this is service. Let's do this. Alright, so it actually required the HTTP protocol here at the beginning, so you need to add this. And when you add that, this is what the data, returning data is. Okay, so it returns basically whatever we had there, right? Localhost / services/service.php. So whatever this returns, this is the data that is returned in the response to us. Okay. In the next video, I'm going to show you how you can format it and print it. And after that, we're going to insert something to the database, insert new items. Hello everyone. So now we're going to use JQuery to nicely print out the items that come from the database. And to do that, we're going to need a variable first. Right. This is where I'm going to read all the items. It's going to be called to-do items. And so we're going to use JSON.parse. So this will take a string that contains JSON data, and it's going to convert that into a JSON object, a JavaScript object. Okay. So basically, we're going to be taking this here, and we're going to turn that into a neat JavaScript object. So JSON.parse, it's going to take the data that is returned from the server. And now, once this is parsed, this will contain 3 objects. As you can see here, first object, second object, and the third object. And I will access each of those objects, and I'm going to add them into this ordered list here to print it. So in order to go through these items, I have to iterate using a for loop, or you can use a different type of loop. I prefer for loop. So variable I is going to be 0. Now again, remember, the to-do list items is an array of objects. So if you go back to service.php, we had the rows array, right? And then we pushed each row into that rows array. So it returns an actual array of objects. And here we convert that stringified array of objects into an actual JavaScript object using this. And now we're going to go through each object and take out its properties. Okay, to do items dot length I plus plus. Now let's create another variable item and let's read properties into the item. So each item has an ID, right? ID is going to be to do items I dot item ID. So this is important. Your properties of your objects has to match the actual keys in the JSON. Okay, so item ID has to be the same, otherwise you're gonna get an error message. And then I'm gonna write in a new line. Description. I'm just gonna leave a blank space. To do items I dot item description, and then priority. To do items I dot item priority, and finally the due date. Items I dot item due date. Now, so in this context of the for loop, item represents one of the items or the item, right? If I is 0, item is going to be item 0, the first one, and then until the loop is completed. But before it completes, I am going to add the item to my items. Now in HTML, a list has list items, so it has to be list item something 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 in the item, and then you close that list tag, right? So I need to follow this format to have a decent looking page. To do that, I'm going to enclose the item with list tags before I append it into the open list. So I'm going to say item equals, so I'm going to enclose it with list item tags. Item plus and list item. Right, so whatever I have here, the string is included between these tags. And then I will append this item into the open list. So to do that, I'm going to use append function of JQuery. But before I need to access to the open list. So to access this, I'm going to use an ID identifier. So when you access an item by its ID, you have to use #, my items, and whatever its ID value is goes there. Now I'm going to use the append function. This will add item into the open list item. Now when you run this, reload this, see, so when the page loads, JQuery runs this block. When you refresh the page, JQuery runs this block. And in this block, it makes a call using the get. It makes a call to my service.php, which is this. So it makes a call here. And then service.php sends a response to my request. So this is a request, get request, and then I get a response, which includes data. And this data comes from this line here. So request comes, connects to database, Okay, it queries the database, it returns results, it reads those results into an array, and then it converts them into JSON string and responds back. Right, so at this point it responded back, so this data came to me, and I parsed it into a JavaScript object, into the items, which is, so this becomes a array of objects, because remember, this is an array, right? Array, the array has 3 objects. And then I go through each item in the array. Now I create a nice tidy string, and I push them into the open list here, and then they print out like this. This could have actually been done with a table as well instead of a list, but that's for you to discover. There's a lot of different things can be done. Hi everyone, in this video I will show you how to post some data to the database using the service. Now let's open up some new space here. First, before we start, let me make some corrections. These inputs had name attributes. I changed them to ID because I'm going to use their IDs to access them and read their read the values from each input before I send them. Now let's start with adding a click functionality, because I want these to be sent to the server, this data, when the this button is clicked. And that button code is here, so that button has a save item ID. Okay, so I'm going to first detect the click on that button. To do that, again, I'm going to access its ID, save item dot click. So this piece of code here is going to detect a click on the save item button. Now once there is a click, I will read each of the values of these input boxes. Okay. Once there's a click, so we'll start with description, item description. So I'm going to access each item and enter their ID into selector part, and I'm going to use the val function of JQuery. So this will return the value of that text box. All right, so I'm accessing this one here using its ID, and I'm returning its value using this function. So I will do the same for the other ones. Variable due date. Due date. Make sure these IDs has to match, otherwise you will get an error message or you will not get the correct value to the server. And we're for priority. Okay, so these are the values I needed. Again, remember, we're not going to enter item ID because the server will, the MySQL server will automatically assign 1. Now I'm going to create a variable object, item object, and this object will have field names that actually match the attribute column names in database. So item description is going to be equal to description, column description, sorry, not semicolon, but comma. Item due date will have the value of due date, and then priority will have the item priority will have priority. Okay, semicolon. So this will create an item object, and we'll send this object to the PHP server so that it can actually insert in the database. But we also have to write a post method. So this post method will post this data to the server. Okay. Now I'm going to use the same URL as here. So that's where my server is. And now, different than get. So get is mainly for fetching data and reading it. Post is also, it can be used for posting, sending the data to the server. Okay. So I'm sending item, this variable that we just read from the input boxes, and I'm also going to have a callback function, which is going to return. So you can actually return a message saying like the data is successfully posted, something like that. We can just print it in the console. Okay, once this is successful. So we handle the client side. Again, there's another reminder. This will assume that you will post perfect data. Okay, so the user will enter some value for each of these, and for the date one, it's going to match this format. I'm not going to handle client-side input validation here because it's not the scope of this course, but there's a lot of resources for that one out there. Now we're going to handle the server part. Currently, this code runs no matter what when you access the service.php, which means it will just read everything and then print it as a JSON string. I don't want that right now, so I'm going to check a couple of things. First, I'm going to check what's the type of post request. So is it get or is it post? Because if you're doing a get request, it means we just want to read the data, just print the data. Okay, if you're doing post, it means that we want to save something into the server. So I'm going to here I'm going to separate the code a little bit. So this block of code will run if my method is get. So I'm going to create a variable, call it method, and so in PHP you can use this line of code to return the method of the request. Okay, so this will return, depending on what it is, it can return get, post, put, delete. So these are the most common ones. Okay, so if the method is get, then I'm going to run this block of code, which will actually run this query, right? If not, then I will check if it's post. If it's post, then I'm going to run some different query. So there's a small problem with the index.html. Let's fix that real quick and then we'll come back to this. Basically, you need to get rid of this period here, and otherwise it's going to be a syntax error. Now we can go back and handle our service for inserting data. Now, since this is a post method, we're going to read the data from the post. Now, so we send the item, right? An item has all these properties. So we can read these properties from the post request. To do that, we're going to access the post global array in PHP, and we're going to enter each item's keys, item description. So this will return item description. This will return this variable that we read from the user input, right? And then same thing is going to go for due date. I'm going to do this post, and then just going to copy these so that I don't do any typos, and priority post, go back to index and copy item priority. Now, so we read the data up to here. We read the user data on the server. Now the PHP, after reading the data, it has to insert it in the database. So I'm going to have a new query, and this query will be an insert query, and I'm going to insert this data to database by embedding it into query and running this query. So we're going to insert into items. The properties are item ID, item description, item due date, and item priority. And the values for these are going to be 0. For the item ID, remember it's going to be auto-incremented. And then now I'm going to use my variables I created here. So maybe let's do it this way. Let's put this in the next line so it's easy to read. Maybe like this actually. Values. I'm going to place these variable names into single quotes because they are non-numeric values. And then due date. And then, so these have to match this order you described here. And then, otherwise your query is not going to work. Priority. Right, and then I'm going to close this parenthesis here and make sure there's a semicolon at the end of the query. Now we're going to run the query. I'm going to run it in an if statement. So if there are actually any problems, it's going to return an error message. MySQL I query function is going to run the query in MySQL. So connection is the connection object, and here's the query, SQL insert. It takes 2 parameters. Now, let's print, if the query runs successfully, we'll just say items successfully added to the database. If that's not the case, then we're going to print error, and then we can actually print the error message with the query. Let's say SQL insert did not run. And then let's print this out, MySQL I error con. So this will return the reason why it did not run. And so let's double check everything. It's good. Okay. Now I'm going to reload the page. Let's enter something. Let's say post grades, and then 2018. So here's the important thing here. If you enter a wrong format, the database will not insert the data. It wants exactly in this format. So let's say you enter something like this, but let's say 05, 05, 14, 2018, right, and then priority high. If I run this, I'm going to get an error message. Okay, so this query did not run. There is a problem. Oh, wait a second. High and high. So this shouldn't be high. This should be the due date. So let's go back to service.php. Where's the SQL? Item due date priority. Yes, you see we read the same input into due date as the priority, so this has to be item due date. So this is why it's useful to print your query when there's an error message, so you can see actually your query is messed up or not. So let's run this again. Now error message did not run, incorrect date values. It gives me the reason why it did not run. This is not a correct date value. Okay, so this tells me why the problem is happening. So what we need to do is that in the service.php, not in service.php, sorry, in the web form here, you have to enter the date type that matches the placeholder. Now again, if you want to fix that stuff, by all means go search for it, but if I'm not going to get in there because that's going to take a lot of additional time and it's not in our scope. So 2018-05, I don't know, let's say 18th. Save item successfully added to database. So again, from the client, from the browser, we took user data, we posted to the PHP, and the PHP service took that data and inserted in the database for us. Now if you go and check out the items, you can see that the new item is there and it's posted in the database.